Thank you guys for coming out. My name is John Gravois, my colleague, my illustrious colleague here.
Hey, Patrick Arlt.
So we work on different teams at Esri, and we actually met and became acquainted and started working with each other via GitHub. So we thought it'd be fun to do a presentation. How many of you guys last year made the CSS for Geographers session?
Or this year. It was earlier this year.
Yeah, we did one earlier today. Okay,
some.
so
okay.
Great. So just to give you a little sort of backstory context, we like the idea of doing some sessions to introduce some concepts that are obviously supplemental to the sort of core GIS stuff and some of the GIS-centric programming content that you see at Dev Summit. And we spun off a CSS talk last year that we were glad to see was embraced. So we expanded that series this year, and we're having GitHub for geographers, JavaScript for geographers, and CSS for geographers. So you don't have to be a geographer to be here. The idea is just that there's no prerequisite knowledge. It's a talk to get familiar with GitHub, and we're taking it for granted that you already know more or less what GitHub is and that you're excited about it for one reason or another. GitHub has just gotten more and more popular over the last couple of years, so you're all gonna have your reasons. There's so much going on GitHub. There's Python and web stuff, there's GIS-centric stuff, there's people are working on revising legislation. You don't have to be a coder or a developer to use GitHub and get a lot of value out of GitHub. So this talk, we're not gonna discuss any code whatsoever. If you have coding experience, that's great. You'll be able to jam in and use that. If you're planning on learning some code, you can do that too, but Pat's in particular a big advocate of this idea of focusing on one thing at a time. So we wanna separate the concerns and just talk about the version control, because despite what people who've used GitHub for a while will tell you, that it's just the easiest thing in the world and they were born knowing it, they're having a little selective amnesia about that ramp up time.
If it was that easy, we really wouldn't do this talk at all.
Yeah, so we thought about this a lot. We talked about it. We thought the most helpful thing to do would be to blast through a little bit the overview and spend most of the time demoing some real world situations that you get into once you start touching Git and GitHub. So hopefully that sounds fun.
Yeah, and you'll see us switch back and forth between our computers a lot. We kind of, as we brainstormed the talks for this year that we wanted to do, we kind of thought it would be a really cool idea if we both presented and we actually passed things back and forth and actually collaborated right in front of you, because a lot of GitHub demos are just one person hammering away at a bunch of like, memorize these 5 Git commands and here's what they do, and actually you don't get to see how it works going back and forth and collaborating between people, which is really the cool part. So we wanted to focus on the cool stuff and then kind of just let you guys go with a couple pieces of reference and let you learn on your own.
All right. So we do need a tiny bit of context. If you haven't already seen it, GitHub, in its essence, it's just a website. GitHub.com, you go to GitHub and people are hosting their projects on GitHub. So GitHub not just has file hosting like Dropbox or somewhere else, but GitHub is unleashing this sort of idea that not only are we going to share the files with you right now, there's also a history to each one of these files, and we're going to maintain that history so you can work your way backwards and forwards through time to see how the files changed, how new files got added, files got updated. And besides just the version control for the files, whether there's code in them or not, whether there's not code in them, there's also some great communication tools for collaboration. This idea of starting up discussions and collaborating together to fix things and ask questions. There's a lot of great tools there. Git is the underlying sort of nerdy command line open source tool that GitHub is built on. So GitHub is a company. They're not open sourcing their website, but they're building on top of an open source version control that was already existed before GitHub was around. So Git is the low-level tool and GitHub is the fancy skin.
Yeah, And I think the thing that I really want to get across in this is a lot of people kind of gloss over when they do the GitHub demos is Git is the differentiators, it's distributed. So the version control is spread out over everyone's machine. So I've got a copy of the code, John's got a copy of it, GitHub has a copy of it, and we all trade around the different versions of the project as we work on it, and we kind of consume edits and we push edits to each other, and it's very much like some of the distributed stuff you saw in the plenary where you can map it out as kind of a graph. And each of our computers in GitHub is just a point on that graph that's all connected.
All right. Oh, I have a little unreveal.
You've got your
it's
own.
A geographer. It's a talk for geographers. If you haven't seen this anywhere else, this idea of SDE versioning is very similar. And when you have replication across different environments, replicated SDE versioning is a very, very similar concept to Git version control. All right. So now let's get into it. It's going to be a demo, and there's two ways we could have run this. A lot of the demos that you find online or tutorials or material for learning Git assumes that you want to create your own new project. And God bless you if that's the way you get started. For me, I'm not a very creative person. I wanted to like be a voyeur and look at somebody else's project and take it and rip it up and see if I could figure out how it worked and ultimately try to make a little contribution to somebody else's project. And it's okay, whatever route you want to go down, but the demo that we're going to do today involves collaborating between two people that don't necessarily know each other. So one person's going to be working with another. So the first step is Pat finding my project that I put on GitHub.
So I was browsing around GitHub one day. I found John's cool little sandbox repo that he's started to put a little README about Git and GitHub, and he also has this GeoJSON file. And we kind of chose this as kind of a nice format because GitHub will render it on a map for you. It'll just take the GeoJSON and show it to you. So I wanted to actually add some stuff to this repo. So the first step is I'm going to fork John's repo. And that's kind of the first step of collaboration on GitHub. So I'm going to fork, and it'll ask me, you know, where do you want to fork this to? I'm part of all these organizations on GitHub, but I actually already forked it. So I'm going to go to my already existing fork. And then this flips over, and the only thing that really changed about the interface is you can see that it's now Patrick Arlt sandbox as opposed to Gravois sandbox. And if I want to kind of keep track of how that works, GitHub has a neat set of graphs. And if you go to the network graph, this actually kind of gives you a history of the project. So here's the history of the project kind of last year. And I'll refer back to that later as we kind of build on the project so you can kind of see what's what and what's going on.
So in this talk, basically what we're going to do is highlight a lot of GitHub nouns and verbs that you start using intuitively over time, but at first you're like, what the heck are these people talking about? So the fork is Pat's copy, still not on his computer. It's still hosted up on github.com. He made a copy of the entire project, and that's because the way GitHub's business model works is if you open source your work, they'll host it for free, and if you want to keep it under lock and key, then you pay them. So I'm using GitHub to host my sandbox. It's open source, it's free for everybody to read, but that doesn't mean I have to let anybody contribute and change it. So the open source nature of it is read-only open source. That doesn't mean I couldn't collaborate, let Pat have the keys if I wanted to, but the beauty of forking is GitHub inverted this idea in open source for a long time that forking an open source project was bad. They want to make forking easy so anybody can do it, so the barrier to entry to collaborating would be lower.
So let's keep going. So I created a fork of the project, so now I actually need to get that Git repository with all that data and those files and the history onto my computer. So I'm going to run a command called Git Clone, and I'm going to go to this URL, and that URL is actually helpfully right here under the clone or download, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go to a terminal. There are many terminals. This one is mine. Your Mac comes with a built-in terminal. If you're on Windows, I really recommend PowerShell. it's a much nicer little environment. So I'm going to type in, we're just going to like really go for it here, Git Clone, and then I'm going to paste in that URL, and I'm going to enter. And it says, we'll go through those fast. It's going to clone Sandbox. It's going to count the number of objects in the history. It's going to compress all of them. It's going to send them all to my computer. And then I can actually change the directory. This is going to be a little bit of a terminal demo. So I'm going to change my directory. I'm going to go into the Sandbox folder. OK, this is a little too big. I'm going to list all the files out, and we can see that I have license, I have friends, and I have a README. And those are exactly the same files that are actually on GitHub. So now I have the project locally on my machine that I can use.
So the big highlighted point here that I want to make is there's an option from the GitHub page to help you clone the repo or just download a zip file. And the difference is they both give you the files, but the clone gives you the history and that tracking if you want to start traversing and seeing incremental changes through time and keep track of it and keep it a version project, you need the clone. And if you just want the files the way you're looking at them, then you can download the zip. So there's no wrong or right answer. It's just choosing the one that's relevant for you at the time.
Cool. So the next step in the process is I want to add something to John's project. So I'm going to create a branch. And a branch is I'm taking that project and I'm kind of splitting it at that point. So I'm going to say I need to make some changes, but I want to keep the changes that I already have there. So I'm going to run a command that's git checkout. I'm going to check out a new branch, and that's going to give me kind of a copy of the code or the files at this point in history. And I'm going to split it. So then I actually have two copies of them on my machine. So I'm going to git checkout. I'm going to check out a new branch with -b. And I'm just going to call this branch updates. And because I'm a cool developer and I spend hours and hours hacking on my development environment in my terminal, you can actually see that it changed to say updates there. So that tells me I'm on the updates branch in Git. And if I run git branch, it tells me that I have two branches on my code now. I have master and I have updates, and that I'm on updates. So anything else? No.
This one we could split in two ways. Let's talk. I'll interject after we actually do the file edit and the commit.
So the next step is I actually have to edit. So I'm going to open up my editor of choice, which is VS Code. You can use whatever you want. We're using totally different tools on our machines just to kind of make a point. So what do you want me to edit? You want to do friends GeoJSON here?
The joke here was that I didn't have any. It's just me, and I need a friend. So if you want to be my friend, you can also add yourself to this nifty file.
I have no idea. This is going to test my knowledge of where lat long is in the world.
We got some geographers in the crowd.
Yeah, does anyone know the lat long of Palm Springs off the top of your head? I had a friend who could actually do this. It was awesome. So I'm going to add.
You could do Null Island. You could do Null Island.
Yeah, actually, let's do Null Island because that's funny. All right, I'm at 0, 0. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to add. I think this is that's syntactically correct. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to add a new feature to this GeoJSON because John needs some friends. So I'm going to help him out. Yeah, I don't know. This formatting looks all weird. I'm just going to save that. So I edited a file now, and I've saved that file, and my editor's cool. So that also shows me in green. You barely see it up there. The sidebar is green. It tells me that I changed lines 15 to 26. And if I wanted to, I can go back to my command line, and I can get the status. Did you mean status? Yes, I totally meant status. And that's also too big. Hopefully this works. Yeah, there we go. So git status, and that just tells me where I am and what's going on. I'm on branch updates. I have some changes that are staged that I'm working on, and I'm ready to commit those changes. And it tells me that I modified friends GeoJSON. So that's cool. I now know, and it says no changes have been added to my commit. So it says use git add or git commit -a. So I need to commit these changes to Git, and that enters them into the history. So I'm going to run git commit, and I'm going to do what it says, and I'm going to go -a. And then I also want to add a message to this commit, so I'm going to do m, and I'm going to say, you know, I have cap locks on.
That doesn't really help either. Oh, there you go.
Ooh, ah.
Now it's a theater.
So I'm going to run git commit -am add Pat as a friend. And it says, one file updated. I inserted 12 lines into the file. And it gives me this little indicator of this is the hash of the commit in the log. So if I run something like git log, it'll show me you made this commit at this time, add Pat as friend. And if I want to see what I changed as a part of that commit, I can do git log and then copy this. Hit Q to exit out of that, and then I can do git diff and paste that, and it'll tell me, no, we just did this earlier.
I think it showed an empty commit too. I can't remember what that command, how that command is.
Here, I'll try this. Git diff head 1.
Should be.
Show me the last commit. There we go. That works. So this is git diff head 1. So this is say, show me the last commit, whatever it is. Head is always where I am right now. So it says, go back 1 commit and show me what I changed. And it says, here's the git diff of friends GeoJSON with friends JSON, and here's the change. So it actually shows me exactly what I changed, which is really nice. So now I've got a commit.
Let's pause there.
Pause there. You want to go
So
there?
I've got a few points to interject. One, I've done trainings on GitHub before, and there are 2 camps of people. There's probably more camps than that, but in this moment, there are folks who get really excited about the terminal command line stuff, and there are folks that do not. Doesn't matter, or it doesn't matter. It's okay either way. Pat's going to show you some terminal stuff, and if you're into that, that's great. But there are also client programs that will help you avoid having to do this. So either way, you're all right.
And you've got one of those later.
I'm going to be showing off one of those later. So that's one sort of caveat or point on the side. The other point is, this is a sticking point. It takes some practice to get used to this concept that on his computer he has a copy of these files. The branch is just a virtual storage place. It's the same files on his computer. And this idea that he makes the edits and then decides that a file is going to participate in the commit and makes the commit, there's a lot of steps. And there's a reason why in the Git landscape you want this fine grain of control sometimes, so that's why the tools are all there, but it's not intuitive to keep track of this fact that we're going through a lot of steps here. So don't expect all this to be, you're not just going to absorb all this and memorize it and do it. It's a learning process that needs to be tactile at some point. So those are my words of either inspiration or making it sound scary, depending on how you want to take it.
Okay, so I've got changes now, and I have changes that are on my machine. And if I flip back to GitHub really fast, you'll notice the changes aren't actually on GitHub yet, because if I go back to friends GeoJSON, there's only 1 point still. Like, I'll zoom out all the way so you can get to Null Island. Let's just go all the way out, even more. Right, there's no point on here yet. So GitHub doesn't know about the changes that I made on my machine because it's distributed. So I have to tell GitHub that I made changes on my machine. And in Gitland, I'm going to push my changes to a remote. And the remote that I'm going to push to is called origin. And the magic of that is you can actually see all of your remotes. I'm going to run git remote. It tells me I have one remote called origin. I'm going to say git remote show, because I want to know more information about origin. And it said, here's all the information I know about where origin is. And origin is on GitHub. So origin is just a name for a URL that's somewhere. So if I run git push origin updates, I'm going to push my changes to GitHub, which is called origin. And I'm going to push the branch called updates. And it's going to do some fancy Git magic that I've never really ever bothered to read, where it does some stuff about compressing things and sends them up. And it says, OK, great, you pushed up a new branch to GitHub called updates. And now if I flip back to GitHub, my second point should show up. And this will be really cool, right? So except I totally know that that wouldn't show up when I did this demo. So where's my point? Well, I'm still on my other branch. I'm still on master, because I've got two versions of the code at this point. I've got two versions of this GeoJSON file. So I need to switch to updates. And when I switch to updates, now we should see, it's been a really long time on this time.
2 points, it's pretty heavy.
It's really hard. Oh, OK, now it
computation.
shows me the syntax error.
Oh, no.
Cool, this will be fun.
Now it's a real live demo.
Now it's a real live demo, guys.
He knew that trailing curly brace was going to get him.
Oh, I think I see what I did. That's geometry there.
Close the
There we
feature
go.
object. Okay.
Done. So now what am I going to do, right? We should just make this audience participation. I'm going to commit again, and I'm going to say fix everything. And then I'm going to push my commit. I'm going to push it to origin. I'm going to push it to updates again, and Git's going to push that change up. And now we should actually be able to go over to GitHub, and we should see my change. There we go. See, so now I have 2 points. And if I look, I can see the history of this, and we can see that John created it. I added myself as a friend, and then I had to fix everything. So I've pushed up my work now, and now I need to contribute my work to John. So now I took the work from my local machine and I put it on GitHub, but it's still under my name. So it hasn't even gotten to John yet, and this is that distributed nature of Git. We're still not back up to John. So the last thing I need to do is I need to create a pull request. And that's a request that I want to merge the changes that I made into John's project. So I'm going to go back to GitHub. I'm going to go back to my home page. And it's going to say, hey, look, you pushed to updates 1 minute ago. Do you want to compare the changes and make a pull request? And this only shows up every once in a while, like right after you push for maybe a couple minutes. So it also lives down here as well in case you get totally lost in the UI. So I'm going to click this. And then it's going to say, hey, we're going to open a pull request into, this needs to be bigger, into John's sandbox repo onto his master branch from my sandbox repo on the updates branch. So let's do this now. Right, and you can leave a message, and this is for discussion. This is some of those discussion features that John talked about. And we can see that this pull request is going to put 2 commits on John's repo, and it gives him a summary of the changes. So he can review this himself and determine if he really wants to be my friend. So I'm going to go back out here. We're going to create the pull request. And now we're back on John's repo. So we're at John's sandbox, and he's got an open pull request, which is number 7 on this.
So let's switch.
Yeah. So
we're switching. I don't have a pull request yet, but by the magic of the internet, now I've got a pull request from Pat. So the nifty thing is you don't have to sit here watching your repos all day long. When you set up your GitHub account for free, you specify an email address, and you can watch. You're automatically going to watch your own repos, and you can watch anybody else's repos, so you get some email updates about activity. So it's like an RSS feed for your GitHub stuff. So I probably got an email, and I looked at this, and this is basically the best pull request you could ever get. You've got a new friend. And the beauty of the pull request is, whether this project's very simple or complicated, the pull request distills very elegantly for me as the maintainer of this project. It makes it totally distinct to me of all the code that's already in there. What Pat's suggesting that I change is just this. If it's green, that means he wants to add it. If it's red, it means he wants to take it away. So I don't have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to think about, what effect that's going to have or whether it's a good idea. The pull request, that idea that this is making collaboration more likely to happen because there's some tools for both parties, that's what GitHub's all about. And a lot of times, a pull request looks good, and I'll say, here's these two new commits. I don't have them in my master branch yet, but if I click this button, they're going to get added to my master branch so that they show up for everybody else as well. So I'm going to say, this looks great. I'm going to click this button and merge and confirm. If I wanted to add some notes of my own, I could do that. But once I confirm that merge, the buttons close. And if I go back to the default page here in GitHub, this master branch has a few more commits. And Pat fixed everything. And friends GeoJSON shows up here too. So that is just a little bit of the collaboration in action. So John merges the pull request. And now I'm going to go back to work and do some more work on my project. I'm going to say, Sandbox looks really good, but it would look a lot better if it had a picture of Frank Zappa there for everybody to see. So this README, this is a .md file. This is still just a text file though. And Pat's so far been showing you the hard way to do things, and I like to do things the easy way. So the most easy way in the world that I can edit this file is I can skip the cloning, I can skip putting it on my computer, I just edit it here in GitHub. And if it's a simple edit, it's probably, it's not a bad idea to do. So I just click this little pencil, and I say, right there in line, I'll just add something here. So here, what we saw before, what everybody saw when they came to the page, this MD file, this is called Markdown. GitHub has a syntax to make it easy to share formatted text. And it looks really nice here, and it's not HTML and really gnarly code on this side. Markdown's meant to be a relatively painless thing to write. It gets less painless as you write more and more of it. So there are a lot of cheat sheets out there for how do you make big text or small text or a table. If you want to embed an image, if you want to embed a link, you just say what text and the URL. And doing that makes it a little something that somebody can click. To do a embedded image is very similar, except you have your alternate text in case somebody couldn't see it. And then the same link, I don't have my link yet. There's my image of Frank Zappa that I have queued up of my work from before. Close it out the same way, I just put an exclamation point in front of it. So that one's a link, this one is an image. Now this project's more or less done. I think it's perfected. So I'll leave both of those in here. And the same way Pat did in the terminal, GitHub gives me a little opportunity to say, how do I want to summarize these changes? And some people are more descriptive than others. It's good to sort of say what you did because you'll forget later. Put in great picture of Frank Zappa. And I can put this right in the master branch, or I can put it in another branch. So there's some cool tools here. So I'm just going to commit this change. So I've got a friend now, I've got a picture of Frank Zappa. For me, by all intents and purposes, I think I'm pretty happy, but we're not done yet. I think Pat's a perfectionist. He wants to do some more work, so he's going to create another branch. And we need, well, there you go.
So I'm going to make some more edits now. So I'm going to actually kind of repeat the same steps that I did before. So I'm going to go back to being in my terminal. We're going to check out another branch that's even more updates. So then I switch to that branch. We'll go back to GitHub. I'm going to start editing readme.md2. And I really, me and my wife want to get some cats. So we're going to put in some images of cats in here. And one of my favorites is a Place Kitten. It's a service for generating pictures of cats at certain dimensions. It's extremely useful. So I'm going to actually put in a whole bunch of cats right here. And it'll give me some different pictures of cats. And that's perfection for me. So I'm going to actually commit that. So I made a change to README. I'm going to commit that change. and add pictures of cats. Perfect. So now I've got that, and I'm going to push that up again too. So I'm going to push that again to origin. This time I'm going to push that to the more updates branch, because I'm on a different branch now, so we're going to just make a third branch.
It's a GitHub sort of best practice to isolate your work in branches, and you understand why when you don't do it. It's just one of those things that getting in the habit, it's like for you geographers out there, using underscore, not putting space names in your in your shape files.
Practice, it's really good. In practice, it's really good. So, I mean, we, on the developer's website, as we're working on it day to day, we have anywhere from like 1 to 200 branches going at any given time, just for all the stuff that we do. So, I've now got that made. So, it's, if I go back to my sandbox, it says more updates created 1 minute ago. So I'm going to actually make a pull request for that now. And it tells me it can't merge automatically. So something went wrong there. And if I scroll down, I don't really see why. So it says, don't worry, you can still create the pull request. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and create it anyway. And it says this branch has conflicts. And this is where that Git being distributed comes in. John and I both tried to edit the same line in readme.md. And Git says, look, I can't figure out if you want to have a picture of Frank Zappa or a picture of some cats. Like, I really can't figure that out. You need to tell me how to resolve the conflict before I can merge these two things together. So there's a couple different ways to resolve these conflicts. So I opened up a pull request. We edited the same line. There's two ways to do it. You can resolve with the command line, which I'll show you, but I also will show you, I'll also click the button and show you how you can do that on GitHub now. They just added it. It was like last month.
And I've got a little caveat here. If he had edited any other line of any file, it would have been fine. This is a very rare case where two people happen to edit the same file at the same time, but we thought that showing you something you're bound to hit at some point and making sure that it's not scary would be more beneficial than just clicking buttons and having everything work smoothly.
And I had to have them right now. So on GitHub, there's this handy button, which is resolve conflicts. So I'll click that, and it says, hey, look, this is where your conflict is, right? Pat wants to add a lot of pictures of cats. John wants to add a picture of Frank Zappa. You need to figure this out before I can continue. So I could do that right in here, but I'm a command line, perfectionist. So I'm going to go in and figure out exactly what I've done wrong. So I'm going to go back, and oh, they got rid of the helpful command line. Oh,
the shortcut?
Yeah, darn. There used to be some really helpful stuff down there, so I'm going to have to do it the hard way.
Well, there didn't used to be resolving merge conflicts directly on github.com, so they added something great, and then they took away something that was helpful to Pat.
I don't have John's changes on my computer yet. So I need to bring down John's changes before I can fix this pull request. Is this on the script? Are we doing it this way, or did you want to keep going?
Yeah, you're going to resolve your merge conflict.
I'm on script.
So the reason he had a conflict is because he never knew about, on his own computer, the change I made. He created that new branch after I made my change, but his branch still didn't know about my work. So this idea of keeping track of all the remote work that's going on is something you have to do manually.
So I need to get John's latest changes because I need to know about the picture of Frank Zappa before I can do anything else. So I'm going to add John's version of this project on GitHub as a new remote. So git remote add John, and then I just grabbed the URL from GitHub and we'll add that. And now if I do git remote, I can see that I have both my project, which is origin, and John's version of it, which is at John. And then I can get all the information I need by fetching all the information from John's repo. So now my machine has a full working knowledge of all the changes John has made. And now I can do what I was trying to do on GitHub on the command line, and I can merge. I know, is it Git?
Yeah.
Yeah, Git merge.
John master.
John master. And I can say, I want to merge John's changes from the master branch of his project into mine. And that says, this failed. That's fine though, because it failed, and I can actually ask Git to tell me where it failed. I figured this out like last week. It was kind of nice. Git Diff Check. This is literally how much, like I've been using Git for 5 years, and I just figured out how to do this like 2 weeks ago. It's Git Diff Check. And it literally just tells you all the places there are conflicts. So there's a conflict on README line 5, README line 11, and README line 14. So I'm going to hit Q. I'm going to back out of that. And if I go back, we can see that my editor has really helpfully marked out for me exactly what we want to have happen. So I'm in head, and this is the current change that I'm trying to make. And this is John Master's incoming change where he wants to add Frank Zappa. So I'm going to just say, well, I could click these super helpful buttons from my text editor, which you can't read, that says accept current change, accept incoming change, and accept both changes. But you also just need to delete these conflict markers. And that resolves the merge conflict. So once I clean it up and I get the file looking how I want it, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to say git commit. I'm going to make another commit that resolves the merge conflict, and that'll tell GitHub what to do. So I'm going to commit. I'm going to say this fixes the merge conflict with cats. And I'm going to commit that, and then if I push that up to my origin, more updates. So push that. And then it says, does a whole bunch of stuff. And then if I go back to my pull request, we can see that this actually turns green now. So now it's OK to merge because Git knows how to resolve the edits between mine and John's changes. So we essentially told Git what to do. So then I think you've got something you want to do next. Yeah. So we'll go to you.
So we're making this. We're showing you some hairy stuff, but I think
this is good though. This is like what you'll encounter in the real world.
Yeah. So now we've got here another pull request, and you know, if I had looked at this before, I would say, I'm too busy to resolve this merge conflict myself. Pat, you have to resolve it, but he's already resolved it just because he's a that kind of guy. He's a polite gentleman. So now, when I compare these two branches, I've got a little nifty thing in here. What Pat did when he merged and resolved that conflict was to get my commit with the Frank Zappa stuff in there and his own commits, and then figure out what to do about it. So now, when I see the changes here, I see what he wants to do is get rid of Frank Zappa and add a lot of cats. And if I go back to, this is the raw file, I can even view what his file looks like, the actual Markdown. Oh no.
Apparently it didn't even work.
So I'm going to say,
there's a whole lot wrong with this.
My suggestion for him was going to be Frank Zappa plus cats, but I'm going to say, what's up with that URL first? And let's add back some Frank Zappa. So I can write back to Pat here and I'll say, I love cats, but the blinks are broken, and cats and Frank Zappa can live together in harmony. And then he knows. And I see this a lot. We're showing you guys some little bit advanced stuff, but lots of people, when they get started using GitHub, you're out there, you're online, you want to make a good impression on people. I've made a career out of being like ignorant, unapologetically ignorant. And I recommend that you kind of think about that as well. The pull requests, I see lots of people submit pull requests and then close them because they're not perfect or they mess something up and they think that everybody's going to make fun of them. I don't know. They think that there's a problem. There's probably are maintainers out there who are jerks, but the best thing for me about GitHub is the idea of like being nice and talking to each other and coming up with a solution together. So if you submit a pull request to a project, whether you know the person or not, you should have a conversation. And the conversation might end in, you know, this maybe isn't the best idea right now. Let's not do it. Or it might end with, your idea was perfect. We're going to merge it just like it is. most of the time it's in between. And having this conversation civilly and saying like, what if we did this? Or let's just talk about it some more. Pat's branch, this idea of comparing the branch, it's a living thing. And Pat can do some more work in this branch and lay down another commit, and we can perfect it together. So, oh yeah, I forgot. I was going to do it.
We're doing this.
At first, I was going to, I forgot. Now, he's done all this work, and I'm just talking and yammering on. Collaboration is good. Talking and me telling him he should fix something that's a viable option. But I could also do this myself. I can say, I like those cats. I'd like to figure out how to fix that. I want my Frank Zappa back. So I can collaborate and go back and improve his branch. So just the same way, we're going to do this in Git Kraken. So we've showed you a lot of command line stuff, and if you're into that, that's great. But Git Kraken is just one of many UIs that make it a little less nerdy to use GitHub. So if I look at Git Kraken here, by default, at first, same way as he showed you on the command line, at first I only have origin. I just have my copy of this on GitHub. So I've got my local work on my computer and my remote branch that's mine. But if I want to know about his work and collaborate with him, I need to track him too. So I don't need to use the command line. I can use the terminal here. And I can say, look at here. Git Kraken says, I can see, I'll make a web request and figure this out. Patrick Sandbox. And I don't want to call this Patrick, or I'll just call it Pat. Now I've got another remote here. And instead of add the remote and fetch, Git Kraken is just kind of helping move this along. This more updates branch is where he's got his work. So it says, cannot find commit to create ref on. Maybe I have to, give me 1 second here. Fetch
Pat.
So it started, oh, but it died? Oh, why is it not working? Oh, there we go. You click the little thing and then it's okay. So it doesn't know about that one. Here we go. I don't know what the eyeballs are fixing, but okay, now I'm good. So I've got he's got fix merge conflict with cats was the last thing that he changed. And I'm gonna switch here. We're checking out master here. And I want to show this off. So if I click more updates and I check out this branch and I go back to my text editor, I'm going to use Atom instead. If I open up this README, and I've got a nifty little live previewer as well, toggle this preview. Here I can see these broken links because I'm in this branch, but I'm going to do a little pseudo magic trick first. If I go back out and check out master, and I look at this file, there's back to having nothing. So this is checking out a branch takes the same files on disk. Like I'll open this in Finder too. It's the same thing if you've got Windows. If I open up GitHub, Sandbox, this README file today at 6:15, and I click more updates, every time I check out that file, one file on my computer fast forwards or rewinds through the commit history, and the file on my computer changes. And I just remember the first time I was like, what the heck is going on my computer? Like these files are changing out from underneath me. That's why you have all the commands to like help you manage this. But this idea of creating a branch and saving the work in a branch, that doesn't create any new folders on your computer. It stores some metadata so that when you check out different branches, the file overwriting can happen. It just happens on disk for you. So hopefully that's helpful. Go back to more updates, and I want to create my own branch. I'm going to create a branch here. I'm going to call mine John and Pat together forever. I've got a branch name here. I named it my own. I've got the same history. When I checked out my branch, you decide which one you want to use as a parent. Now I've got John and Pat checked out. Here's the cats, right? All this. What was the?
It's actually down. So it's lorempixel.com. There, use that one.
Okay.
This one looks more reliable.
Lorempixel.
My trusty cat placeholder image service is not working.
This
is truly live demo material here.
Oh, look at that. It worked automatically. So lorempixel.
And then you do like slash. Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. Add slash cats to the end. Let's keep this on point.
Too many .coms. Cats. There's one.
There we go.
So let's do it like this. I'm going to say cats are great, And like I said before, there's no reason why we can't also have Frank Zappa. And what was that URL? That was in, forgive the nausea here. Okay, back to Adam. So we've got cats, we've got Frank Zappa, we've got a space here. Beautiful. That's kind of magic right there. So I saved the file. Here in Adam, you see the same thing, this idea that the file's edited, we know about a change. So if I go back to Git Kraken, I can save the file on my computer, but I have to go an extra step to make that commit. And when I'm in this view, fix the merge conflicts, there's like a little handy UI here. What do I have to do? I should have probably practiced a little more than this with this different one. But we can see what stage, here it is. Okay, cool. So stage all the changes, choosing which file edits you want to be incorporated. I can click stage all. The message is hello, because I'm just spacing at this point. There's another commit, so no terminal, no command. And I think there's some ways to set it up so that it automatically pushes, but I'm gonna click push. What remote or branch should John push and pull from? So if I had permission, I could push straight to Pat, but we don't know each other that well. This is still, we're still doing a mating dance here. So I got to push to origin. And remember, for him, origin was his. For me, origin's mine. They're all just placeholders. Git has as many, you can track as many as you want. I push this up. I go back to github.com. I look at my pull request. I want to make a pull request of my own. So I don't want, you're always comparing two branches with the pull request, but this, I want to compare two different branches on two different forks. So the base is the one that you're going into, and the head is the one that you're taking from. So I'm going to say Patrick, his more updates branch compared to John and Pat. And before you even press the button to create the pull request, you can preview how many commits are going to be there and what the file change is going to look like. And if there's like 1,000, you messed it up. And if there's 1 or 2, you did it right. So here's, I got rid of all the cats, and I got Frank. This looks good to me. I've previewed it. I say, hello, Pat. We are friends. So now I'm making a pull request to him on the branch that is, he's already making a pull request to me. So we have multiple pull requests going on at the same time. And when I make this pull request, it's up to Pat to take a look at it. So go back to Pat.
Cool. So this is, I'm now signed in. I'm looking at my repository, and I see that John has actually suggested some changes to me about this file. So John wants to make changes to my branch. And I can see that he wants to have cats and Frank Zappa, which I think is pretty cool. So I'm going to say I'm going to merge this.
So if I looked at that page, there wouldn't be a button there because I'm not allowed. But since Pat is the master of his own domain, he gets to merge it.
And then the cool thing is that if I go back and look at John's, this updated automatically. And it gives us a little history. So I made the pull request with add pictures of cats, and then I fixed the merge conflict, and then John commented that he loved cats, and then I see that John fixed it, and then I see that I merged it, and all of that's bundled up now automatically in this set of changes. And you see now we have the final set of what changed. So my 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 of lines of cats is no longer there because the only difference is that we're removing the link and we're adding a cat and then we're moving the picture of Zappa around. So let's switch it back to you.
You merged it, okay.
Yep, we're all merged.
So Pat's better at me than keeping track of the slides and doing the work. So I tracked his fork, but this is the command, but I didn't use the command. I just used the Git Kraken because it's easier. I did fetch in the information. I just clicked another button that worked. Checked out a new branch. So I chose his more updates branch as the base for mine. I did all that and opened a pull request of my own. Okay, we will whiteboard it in a second. But I guess all we got to do to close it off is the pull request. I got to merge his pull request.
Merge it.
Got to merge it. All right. So back to pull request, not in his, in mine. Pull request 1, add the picture of cats. So he resolved the merge conflict. I helped him fix the broken links. We had a little conversation. Now everything's perfect. Now I can merge his. And the work he did is push back upstream. So that is teamwork making the dream work. So if you're a visual learner, the whiteboard is, there's lots of stuff. There's lots of sort of tutorials and diagrams and stuff out there. But I like this one a lot. This is my copy up on GitHub. This is Pat's copy up on GitHub. Then once we clone it down, so this is the origin, this is the fork, this is the local clone, and you pull information down from that, you stage the changes of a files, you make a commit, so pulling, committing, pushing, cloning. This represents, you know, all the verbs and some of the nouns from GitHub, all in practice. So that, what do we got time-wise?
We're perfect.
We've got like 9 minutes, we're pretty good. So just as a sort of recap, we wanted to show, like, intentionally show a rat's nest of making things complicated, not because you're going to hit it in the first 5 minutes, but this is like a condensing maybe your first couple months and using GitHub, maybe theoretically. So, you know, hopefully it wasn't intimidating. It was informative. We got a bunch of resources here. There's guides.github.com. There's lots of tutorials and sites out there. The only way to learn this stuff is to start playing with it, whether you're doing it on your own. If you want to use the sandbox, I created this a while ago. So I created some issues here. A more beginner GitHub sort of workflow, making a pull request is a pretty big deal. When you make your first pull request, you should pat yourself on the back. The issue is just logging a bug and saying, where's the cats, bro? Like, it's totally a viable first step to get started on GitHub, to collaborate and have conversations with people. So I have some placeholder issues in here, some homework assignments. If you want to start using GitHub and getting some tactile experience with it before you work on your own project, these are documenting some of these steps. And if you have questions, if you want to use this repo as your sandbox, that's why I called it sandbox. There's one for getting started, one for working with forks, one for keeping the fork in sync when somebody else does it. So feel free to hit us up here or ask us questions anywhere else. And using all these resources. I'll put the slides back up. The session surveys are really valuable for us, so we can take the candid feedback if you got suggestions for improvement.
Especially for this one. This is the first time we've done this one, and it's the first time we've done a format like this for both of us, so we want to know if this was super helpful or not, or if it was good.
Yeah.
So, and then, yeah, slides.
That's all we got. So if you want to look up some of these links, there's a lot more documentation on, you know, all this stuff, so you can read up on it a little bit more and then just play around with it. Hopefully you guys had fun. We'll be hanging out for like 10 minutes for questions. Otherwise, enjoy your evening.